Well, we love all our kids, our grandkids and our great-grandkids. We wish the best for them. We hope that they go places and do things that they want to do, that are not forced to do, but enjoy the life that you've got.
Because we've had a very good life.
We've had a good life. We've been a lot of places. We've seen a lot of things.
Enjoyed ourselves.
And we've had a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I was raised in Boise. Grew up till I was graduated high school and joined the Marine Corps. We lived in. My daddy had a house of his own for a while, and then he was going to remodel it. It was 2-story. Aunt Dot lived upstairs, and Uncle Roy, and then we lived downstairs. Then he decided to remodel it, and then we moved in with Grandpa. And then we ended up staying there because Dad never finished like all his other remodeling projects that he did. They never got completed. So we lived with Grandpa until he passed away, and so we just took over his house. And I found some paperwork where Dad and Uncle Howard went together and bought Grandpa's house out so that he wouldn't have that as part of his estate when he went into the nursing home. Anyway, we lived on South 17th across from the power station, substation. We used that for our playground. That's where we played football and what have you, because all our yard was dirt and junk. So we spent a lot of time in the summer at the river, because it was just about 2 blocks away, 3 blocks. Actually, that was the one time that we took baths most often because we took them in the river. During the winter, we took baths on Saturday night. That was the only night we did take baths. That was because we went to church the next day. Then when I graduated high school, and I'm probably the first that I know of in my family that graduated high school. Then when I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps, which was my plan from the beginning of time, I guess, because my Uncle Howard was in World War II. He was a Marine, and then Jerry, one of my cousins, was a Marine, so I decided that I was going to go in the Marine Corps when I graduated. And I had a buddy of mine that was one day older than I. My birthday was on the 28th of January, his was on the 27th. Carl and I were going to go in the Marine Corps together, and then Carl went visiting and he had an accident down with his cousins, I guess, down in New Mexico, and he couldn't go in the service when I did. So, and Carl's the one that got me in trouble. We were out riding around one night in my senior year in high school. I bought my own car. I'd worked at a nursery, greenhouses, worked there for my senior year, and I saved up all my money and bought me a car. And it was a piece of junk, but it had a radio that worked. That's what my girlfriend wanted. So anyway, we were out riding around. I was almost out of gas, and I knew I had to go to work in the morning, so I told Carl we was going to quit, and he said, well, I can get you some gas. And anyway, he went in, got a jug and a rubber hose, and he was going to go siphon gas out of somebody's car. Unfortunately, the place he picked steal gas from, people had made an apartment out of their garage, and they were living in the garage. And they heard him and caught him. Well, he went running off down the road, because I was already out and driving around. I wasn't with him. Anyway, when I saw him running down the road, I stopped and picked him up. And when I picked him up, they were chasing him, and they got my license number and turned it in. So anyway, we went to court. We both spent 5 days in jail for stealing gas. Fun was had by all. It was a lesson. Don't do anything to get yourself in jail, because it wasn't any fun. My mother was probably a second generation off the boat Norwegian. Her family lived in Montana around Butte. Mama was 4'9½", meanest lady I ever met. She could chuck rocks a long way, because she usually chased me out of the house with a broom and then started throwing rocks at me, because I was mean, always into trouble. And but Mama, she cleaned house. She's a housewife. She didn't work outside the home. She took care of us kids. And the only time I ever remember her going back home was one of her uncles got killed in a tractor accident. And her and my youngest sister, Marlene, went home with her to Montana for that. And that's the only time I ever remember Mom going any place doing anything away from the house. Dad, I thought he was close to being off the boat, family-wise, but since then I've discovered that our family's been in the country for a long time. So I've been doing a family genealogy thing, and they've been around since early 1600s in the country. So he was just a laborer. He worked at a company that sold wholesale wood products, and he was there for years. He probably went through 4 different companies owning the same business, and the house we lived in had cold running water. We had to heat it on the stove if we wanted hot water for our baths. We had a flush toilet, but it was out in the backyard someplace. I'm the second. My mom had a daughter before Mom and Dad met, Dixie. Then I'm the oldest from their marriage. Then my middle sister, Pat, was the second after me, and then Marlene was the youngest. Dixie was the oldest, but she was from a previous marriage. She was adopted by Dad when they got married. So, all girls except me. That's why I was so mean. I had to put up with women all the time.
I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and it was right after the war, World War II, and Mother and all her sisters and her mother were in Wichita, and they were working on the airplane factories there. And so after I was born, I think, as far as I know, the stories that they moved back down to Van Buren. I went to school in Alma. Well, really, I started school in Van Buren, and kindergarten, preschool, I went to a little First Baptist preschool there, right on the old highway. Started, they didn't have kindergarten, they had first grade. Went to Sophie Meyer, that was right there in Van Buren. And then till my second grade. And I was living with Grandma and Uncle Dan. Uncle Dan had to put up with me. He was my babysitter. And he hated me. Because if he wouldn't do what I wanted him to do, I'd go tell Grandma, and then he'd get in trouble. And I feel real bad about that. He'd have to take me to the movies. And we only had just maybe 20 cents. You could get in the movies for 10 cents. And then I would tell him, you have to buy me some popcorn, or I have to have some candy. And he would get mad because he wanted to use the money for something he wanted. It was a love-hate relationship there when he was only 15. I was probably 2, 3 at the time, and Uncle Dan was probably around 12, 13. In second grade, Grandma remarried, and Mother found a family that would take care of me for a while, and that was in 2nd grade. And then I didn't like it there, and I kept fussing and complaining. I was sort of like my daughter, that I would until I finally got my point across. So Mother moved me with Aunt Mary in Bond Special. So she took care of me then for about a year, maybe 2. That's my 3rd grade up to 5th grade. We only had 2 classes of 5th grade, 6th grade, and you started 1st grade and went all the way up. But very small school. Very few kids lived in town, and that's still the norm. It's more of a bedroom community. Everybody worked like in Fort Smith, and they would drive back and forth. Growing up was fun. 5th grade on, I had a bike. I went everywhere in Alma. Had a lot of friends. Go skate in front of all the churches because there were sidewalks there. And I'm just a very, very busy person. If I wanted something, I'd go next door to Granny Cook's, and if I got hungry, I'd eat with her. She loved to sew and quilt, and I do too. Taught me how to can, peel peaches, peel potatoes, apples, and we had a game going that you would start at the top of an apple and go all the way around, and if you had the longest string, you'd win. I mean, it was fun. It was like a grandma to me. She's always cooking something or had something there for me to do. So I enjoyed going there. I started driving when I was about 13. Mother would get her paycheck and cash it, and then put all the bills in an envelope, and she would give them to me. So she taught me how to drive. And I got to keep the car on the days that she was working. I'd take her to work, and I'd go around and pay the bills or go and get groceries. And this helped her because she was a single mom, and it was very difficult, her working all day and because everything closed early then when we were growing up. And they were closed on Sunday, well, Saturday and Sunday, any offices. So I backed out one day downtown. I thought, I'm just going to burn all the rubber. Squealed out and laid a patch, which I go, man, that was tough. And then I went and picked Mother up. She says, what's this about you squealing tires downtown? And I didn't tell her, but she knew it before I did. So, small town, I think she found out a lot more than what I wanted her to know. But I told her, yep, I did that. But I didn't get in trouble, thank goodness.
All right, so your senior year.
Growing up, I was very independent. And if I decided I wanted to do it, I would just do it. And I would always tell the truth after I did it. And that way I knew Mother wouldn't get on to me. So I would, one time I decided, I ran around with a lot of the girls I played basketball with, and we just had a lot of fun. And they decided to skip. It was junior, senior skip day. I wasn't a junior and I wasn't a senior. But I had access to Mom's car because she was working. and I knew where the key was. It was hidden in the car. So we all walked the back way in town so nobody would see us. Of course they did. Got in the car and everybody paid 25 cents so I could fill it up with gas so Mother wouldn't know that I took the car. And we went to Fort Smith. Now I had never driven across the old bridge at Fort Smith, and I couldn't even hardly see above the steering wheel because I was real short. And I started on the bridge. I go, oh, please let me get there. Don't hit anything. And our goal was to go to Camp Chaffee because that's when Elvis Presley was there. And everything was in the news that he was getting his hair cut. And he was we were all teenage girls very impressed. So I was brave enough to, in the car, there was no seat belts and it was full. And we drove over there. And I can't believe that they let us on base, but they did. We had so much fun driving around, waving, and all the young-looking guys. We never did sing, but we had so much fun. We didn't even stop and eat because we didn't have money. We used our lunch money to pay for gas to get over there and turn around. But had to watch the clock because most of the girls lived out in the country and they rode the bus. So I had to get them to school and drop them off so they could slip on the bus. And then I parked the car and I walked home, which was probably 2 miles from town because I didn't want her to get in trouble. But then when she came home, she said, "Did you use my car?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, okay." But I never did tell her that I drove all the way to Fort Smith. But it was interesting. I would have shot my child if I'd have known she'd done that at that age. But it was fun growing up. My junior year, Aunt Louise was having a lot of medical problems, and she lived in Redlands, California. She sent a letter to Mom, and Mother was having a very difficult time financially because there was 3 of us kids. I was the oldest, my sister, 2 years younger, and then my brother, 1 year after my sister. And it was very difficult to raise 3 kids. And so my aunt wanted me to go out and help during the summer. She had 4 children. And so I went out sort of like a nanny. And she was always there, but I'd help with the kids or keep an eye on them or play with them all summer. And I really liked it out there. And Uncle Floyd and Aunt Louise sat me down and said, "Would you like to stay here and finish your last year of school?" And I said, "Yeah." So Mother okayed it, and that's how I wound up in California. They made fun of me. I was called Sweet Magnolia because of my southern accent. So I really shut down and quit talking a lot. I didn't make a lot of friends. I made one friend, a young lady. Her dad was in the service, and she traveled around a lot, moved around. So I think we just bonded real good, for that last year. Graduated from high school and decided to stay on. Went to beauty school. I got a job so I could pay my way through school and live with Aunt Louise and Uncle Floyd. I finished cosmetology school, and I was working, and Aunt Louise and Uncle Floyd built a new home up in Yucaipa, so we moved up there, and I got me a job in Redlands, and I was working there. And on the weekends, I would take the kids skating, or we would go do something fun, and or the movies. Movies was cheap then. You could get in for maybe 50 cents, 75 cents, with popcorn 25. So after working, I could afford take the kids for a treat. And we went skating one night, and there was this guy that kept skating around and around, and I was trying to ignore him, and I would sort of look at him too. He was so cute. And he kept skating, kept staring. I said, I'm going to teach him. And there was Letty's Choice on skates. So I skated up to him and I said, would you like to skate with me? And he said, yeah. And we started out, and he was tripping over himself. But we started talking, we skated and skated. And from that time on, we just kept talking, and we had so much in common and so enjoyed each other that after the first date, I knew that that was the guy I was going to marry. So, oh, and well, Anita gave our phone number because I was taught you never give your phone number to, especially a service guy. You don't date service guys because they're not really, you just don't know what they'll do. You know, that's how Aunt Louise says, you don't date service people. So, but he was so kind and so nice. His manners were so kind. In fact, he bought Anita and Harold, and I think Rodney was with us, Cokes. And boy, that was a lot of money then for him, because he probably made, his free paycheck was probably maybe $50, $60, and that would have to last him from payday to payday. So that was a lot of money, and Anita loved him, just fell in love with him. And that was how we started.
Spent 4.5 years active duty in the Marine Corps. Met your mama, skating rink. I'd been into a clerk type of school. I was stationed at 29 Palms, California. After finishing all my schools, my other schools, my regular schools, and then they sent me off to a clerk type of school. And met Mama at a skating rink in Redlands. Asked for her phone number, and she wouldn't give it to me, but Anita did, her cousin, because she was living with her aunt at the time. We had our first date on Halloween night, and we got married in April the following year. And I went off to Vietnam in August the following year.
Well, we got engaged very close to Christmas, and Grandma let me have her engagement ring, so I wore it. I thought I was so cool. And we put our names in the paper that we were engaged, and like a proper Southern young lady would do out in California. So I started planning the wedding. And I told him, I said, we will have to get married in a church with a pastor. That's very important to me. And we will go to church. And I kept stressing to him, if you decide to marry me, that is it. We will not ever get a divorce. We will have a very, very long married life with our children. And he agreed. So, and when we got married, we went to Vegas, and we found the Little White Chapel. That's where we got married. And I think we had to pay a little bit more, but I insisted that the pastor come from, to marry us. And I felt more comfortable that way, and he did. And then as soon as we got married, we headed back home. We had a little reception. Aunt Louise made us a cake, little tiny, in the kitchen with just family and a couple of the girls that I worked with. And then I think I got an ironing board, and I got some Melamac dishes, things that you would think you would be sending your child off to college. Maybe 4 fork spoons. And
We got married in April of '65. Mom swears up and down that I knew that I was going to Vietnam. I had no clue. She knew before I did that I was going to Vietnam. She was a cosmetologist, and she was working at the beauty shop on base at 29 Palms after we got married. And one of the battalion's staff officers' wives was one of her clients, and she told her that we were going to load up and go to Vietnam. So she knew before I did that I was actually going to Vietnam. But she swore up and down, because she had made the plans for going, a church wedding, had set up a church in Redlands to do the wedding at, and then we decided to go to Vegas. Aunt Barbara convinced us that we could go to Vegas and get married. And one of my best friends there in service was Alvin A.C. Miller and his wife. They went with us as witnesses. And we went to Vegas, got married, and drove back. She wouldn't even let me go into the casinos and gamble while we were there. So
it was fun. When we got back to 29 Palms, we rented a little duplex apartment. We paid $65 for our duplex apartment, 1 bedroom, and I thought it was so expensive. But it was a very nice one. We had to live off base because they didn't have room for us on base, which was a good thing because it was a lot better and a lot bigger.
And then in May, I was put on guard duty. I spent 30 days on guard duty, which meant I couldn't go nowhere, do anything. We were not planning on having a phone in the house until we could afford it. But in order for me to go home and live off base, I had to have a phone. So we ended up putting phone in the house because we had to have it. Because we were also on search and rescue in the desert, because 29 Palms was in the high desert of California, and a lot of idiots would go out there and get lost. And, it was our job to go find them if they actually got lost, but we never had to go do it. And I finished my 30 days on guard duty, went on a 2-week field problem, come back from that, and they put me on another 30 days of guard duty. So our first few months together was didn't get a whole lot of time together. And then in August, we went to Vietnam. So when I went to Vietnam, Mom, because I was an E5 at the time, they paid for her to move her, and she moved back and lived in one of Grandma's apartments down in Redlands, or Yucaipa, excuse me. And she lived there in that until I got back from Vietnam. So while I was in Vietnam, we got to go on R&R to Okinawa, so our first anniversary was spent, and our first Christmas. I was overseas, so when I was in Okinawa, I bought crystal, silver, and china for her first anniversary and sent it home.
Your dad, for my birthday, bought me a poodle, and Jacques was very, very close to him, and it helped me when your dad went to Vietnam. Long year, but I made it through, and it gave me a lot of independence. Aunt Barbara and Aunt Louise wanted me to come and move in with them, but I felt like okay, I'm an adult, I'm married, and so I rented an apartment from Grandma. And then he came home. We sent letters back and forth. He only called me, I think, twice. I got to really hear his voice on the phone, and that was really neat. The way we communicated, we wrote letters back and forth, and then we got a tape recorder, little, very small, and we would tape, and that helped a lot too, just to hear his voice. Because I do better at talking than sitting down and writing things out. And you get to hear the voice and the expressions, and it was very nice. My first anniversary, I got my china, and I couldn't believe it. Your dad felt so guilty because we weren't together, you know, because we missed our first Christmas, our first, you know, everything. But he made up for it. So I got my china. That came, it was in 2 boxes, and I just couldn't believe it. And then I think the crystal came, and that was in a lot of boxes. It was like every other day I would get a package, and that was a lot of fun. And got my silverware. I thought, golly, this guy loves me. So.
Well, for my birthday, she'd send me cookies on a regular basis, probably once a month, every 2 weeks. I got letters on a regular basis. And then for my birthday, she sent me a big package with a cake. Well, first of all, it had a letter on it that said, "Do not open until your birthday." So I didn't open it. When I finally opened it, it had a cake in there that was moldy, so we had to throw it away. But it had a can of icing. We managed to eat that down. All of us, we shared. And I don't know if anybody remembers the Jiffy Pop popcorn in the little aluminum pans. She sent me 2 packages of those, and I had to go to the cooks and give them one of them so they'd pop them for me. And then they sent me a bunch of little toys, cars, and, Slinky, and Yo-Yo, and anyway.
Couldn't wait till he got home in August. Just could not wait. He gave me a phone call, says, "I'm going to be in," and he said, "I'll call you as soon as I land." And he called me, and I think I did a little speeding. I won't exactly tell you how fast I went down Del Toro to pick him up at the Air Force Base. So.
Went to Vietnam from 29 Palms. When I come back from 29 Palms, from Vietnam, I was stationed in Yuma, Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. Was there for 6 months till I got out, because when I come back, I only had 6 months left. I ended up being extended 6 months before we left, so that I could go. Anyway, so that's what I had left to do when I come back from Vietnam. I had 6 months, so we went to Yuma, and I was part of a new battalion that they were just starting up. At that time, they were starting the 5th Division, and I was starting up a new air missile battalion. So I was part of the opening up everything and getting new stuff set up, getting everybody trained. Then I was gone.
We moved to Yuma, and for 6 months, our little apartment, it was an old house because we couldn't find any place. On base, around base area at that time of year, in that year, a lot of people were coming back from the Marines, and we were lucky that we had 1 bedroom. The living room, you could sit in 1 chair and almost touch the TV with your feet. It was that small. It was a little sunroom. And my kitchen was on the back porch that they made into an apartment, and I couldn't open my oven door and walk around it to get to the kitchen table. So it was interesting cooking in that little place. We had a monkey that was, because it was very warm there, that lived out in, had trees around it. So I would sit in the living room, watch the monkey swing from tree to tree. We had oranges and grapefruit, a lot of citrus.
After I got out of the Marine Corps, I started my first job. I was working for Systematics at that time. No, it's not Systematics, Frieden.
We moved to LA, and it was almost 2 years before we had Floyd. Wanted kids right away, but couldn't for some reason. And finally got pregnant. Just so excited. And I know exactly when I did, because your dad had school in Northern California, and I got to fly up there. He was gone for like a month, and then he saved enough money, and I was working in LA doing hair, and went up there for a weekend. That's when I got pregnant. So your dad went to a lot of schools, which was really neat because it really helped in his job. The apartment that we lived in when Floyd was born, it was a nice apartment, big, 1 bedroom, big living room, kitchen, but it just wasn't a lot of room, and we were upstairs. And one time I took Floyd down to play out in the front grass, and I was told by the manager that we weren't allowed for our children to play in the grass. And I thought, there's no way I will live here and raise my kids. So, and then we moved out, and you were born. We lived in an old house then, and it just wasn't home with LA. Too many people.
We lived in Los Angeles. Floyd was born in Los Angeles in '68. You were born, Christy was born in LA at '69. And then we decided that we didn't want to raise our kids in Los Angeles. So we moved back to Arkansas.
This is the story about Christy and Floyd. Wayne was going to another school in Northwest California, and I went up with him with the kids. We stayed in this little duplex apartment, and I would take them to the park and play. But my children we raised them to be kind, be sweet. You don't say bad words, And the children there in this little courtyard was horrible. And one day Floyd was playing, and this one little boy took something away from Floyd, and Christy went up and just started hitting him on the back of his head and talking really, really fast. Said, "Get off and leave my brother alone." And she was very, very defensive. That I'd never seen her show anger before. That was my first time I've seen that she was defeating. And her brother was older, but Floyd was taught, you don't hit, and your sisters, you're always kind. Well, here comes his sister, was going to fight for him. And then one time, the same time that we were there, I kept telling Wayne, I think Christy is saying bad words. She's picking it up from the kids. No, not my child, he said. We were on the freeway coming from San Francisco going to probably San Jose to visit my sister then. And Christy just let out some curse words. And Wayne was on the freeway and we were in the middle lane and he goes, "Jump!" He got out of the car and spanked her. Said, "You don't say." Really got in trouble. And then he believed me that Christy was saying she picked up a lot of bad habits. And Kathy was born in Fort Smith, and she was like, she loved to follow in her brother's footsteps. She did not care to play with her sister at all. And she loved to dress up in football outfits of her brother's when he had outgrown them, and she would dress up and go out and bug him to play football with her. So.
Then Kathy was born in 70, right after we got back and moved back to Arkansas. Mom flew back with you and Floyd. You were both small. You were still in an infancy. Floyd could walk a little bit. So she flew back with you, and I drove back a truck with all our household goods.
So we had 3 children in 3 years, and I don't know how we did that. I just, it was interesting raising them, and sometimes it was very difficult, but it was well worth it. We bought our first house in Alva. It had taken us a year or 2 years to save up enough money for down payment. And we were so excited. And I think why I was excited because we were half a block from my mom. So I knew that the kids could go down there and visit. She could spoil them to death. And especially if I wanted to get rid of them, I'd say, "Go down and see what Mama's doing." And I think it was a fun time for my kids. I think they enjoyed living there because they were very free. They were raised like I was growing up. They could go and play with their little friends. Friends could come to us. I knew their parents. It was just a fun time for them. And they still have friends from Alma. They were growing up young.
And then we got to Arkansas. I went to school. I went to college. At that time, it was West Ark in Fort Smith. And I did 2 years of junior college there. Then I went back to work for the company that I worked for in LA and worked for them for we started our fence company after that. I was putting up chain link fence around western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma until we decided that we weren't doing any good at that either, so I went back to work for the company that I worked for in LA. And by that time, Singer had bought them out, and so we was working for Singer then, and worked for them for a long time. Then I went to work as a computer programmer because I started taking night classes and programming at West Ark, and I didn't get another degree. I just took on night classes, took on a lot of hours, and finished that. Went back to work for one of the banks that I had been servicing their equipment with because they put in their own computer system, and I started doing as a program. Well, I started as the night operator for a year, and then I went in there as a programmer for another year. And then I hired out to Systematics then. and spent 27 years with them, being programming computers for bank software, and traveled all around the world and around most of the United States working on bank software.
We adopted David. He was special needs, and we asked for one. And Kathy had a bicycle rack, and she's a miracle that God let her live. We were very thankful, and I saw so much up at the hospital. She was at the hospital for about 2.5 months, and most of that time she was in a coma. And I saw these children with no parents. It really touched my heart, thinking, how could parents not be there, you know? And so Wayne and I talked for a long time, and we decided to apply to social services, see if we could adopt. And it took about a year, and we went through all the process and all the paperwork, all the legal work, and we got David. And David and Kathy were very close together. They played a lot together. And he is doing very well independently. And that was our goal, for both of our special needs children to grow up and be independent. And then after they grew up, we adopted Tony. We wound up getting Tony. My mom and stepdad had him. He came from my half-sister Fran, and she just was not mature enough to raise a child. So I was asked if I would keep him for a little while, and went down and got him. And we lived in Indiana then, and got him and just fell in love with him, and he's been part of our family ever since. When he was 3rd grade, we weren't going to adopt him. We were just going to love him and let him be part of our family. And he said, I want to be an Alverson too. So it saved us money, and we went to a lawyer, and we talked to him, and he became an Alverson, and we're very proud of him. In the Air Force, and has made a very, very good life for himself. We're very proud of him. Our oldest is Floyd, and then the next year, there's Christy, and then the following year, there's Kathy. And then we adopted David, and then we got Tony. So a big, wide age group there. And Tony couldn't figure out why we were so strict on him. And we said, well, this isn't our first rodeo. But he thought that he should be the only child. You know, and all the other kids would come home and they said, well, we had to eat generic cereal. We didn't get this. Mom would buy that. Look what's in the cupboards, you know. He had it pretty good. We tried not to spoil him, but when you got the baby, sometimes it is, you know.
Starting with Floyd.
Starting with Floyd.
Okay, what are we doing?
We're describing Floyd, what we think our oldest son. Is there words to describe Floyd?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out words for all of them.
I think Floyd growing up was a challenge. I thought I was going to beat that child to death before he turned 1, 2. He was always getting into something.
Well,
Or tearing something up.
he
or
was inquisitive.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
He was always into things, looking for things, trying to figure out how things worked.
The one story is when he spilled the fingernail polish.
Well, I'll go back even further than that. I had this real nice Akai reel-to-reel tape recorder that I had bought in Vietnam. Well, bought on my way back from Vietnam in Okinawa again. Anyway, it had a spindle on it that would reduce the speed on it so that tapes, when you're recording tapes, you could record them at a slower speed. But it was removable, and one day it just disappeared. Couldn't figure out what happened to it. And he was probably about a little over, well, 1.5, I don't know.
2.
Well, Christy hadn't been born yet, so yeah.
Yeah, he was.
No, she was. We was living in that apartment on Burlington at the time.
Okay.
But anyway, I just asked him, I said, Floyd, have you seen this? Uh-huh. Well, where's it at? Well, and he pointed at one of the holes, the jack holes he had taken it off the little keeper that held it in place, and he stuck it in there. I mean, he was pretty honest about everything. I mean, if you asked him about anything, he would tell you where or what most of the times. And then we moved back. When we moved back to Fort Smith after you were born, after Christy was born, we moved back to Fort Smith. And again, Floyd just kind of wandered around, went his own way. He did things. And we had this neighbor, and they never locked their house. Nobody locked their houses back then. And he went over to the neighbor's house. They had this brand new TV that they just bought. And he went.
Colored. It was
A
colored.
color TV.
That's it. Big
Anyway,
deal.
nobody was home. We went over there to visit, because they had kids about his age. And they went over there to visit. And he come running back to the house, and hollering to his mama, come here, come here, come here. Anyway, they had left a bottle of fingernail polish open on top of the TV, and he knocked it over, and when they tried to wipe it up, it took the finish off of the TV. Unfortunately, at the time, I was working at Sears there in Fort Smith, and I had a guy there that came into Sears on a regular basis that did refinish work on cabinets and on their wood products that they sold there at the store. And so I hired him to come out there and refinish the TV, redo it, and he did a pretty good job. They claimed that they could still see where it was spilled, but they couldn't. I couldn't even see where it was spilled, because he did a pretty good job on it. But he was, I don't know. At that time, Floyd slept with a little baby doll. And it was my thing to go around and give everybody goodnight kisses and hugs when they went to sleep. And so one night, I come in there to give him his goodnight kiss and tuck him in, and he held up his baby doll and he says, kiss my baby's butt. Anyway, there were moments. But he grew out of those. The one thing that his mama didn't like was when we were living in Farmington, and it snowed that winter real bad. Him and one of his buddies were going to go build a snow fort and spend the night in it. Mama didn't want to let him do it, but I said, yeah, I'd let him do it. So she was up all night long looking out there to see if their fire was still going, see if they were taking care of themselves. And then, of course, he was in 4-H, raised his cow and his chickens. And Daisy the cow. Daisy was quite a character in her own self. She would follow me around while I was mowing. I had a rear bagger mower, and it would fill up with grass when I was mowing, and she'd follow me around, and then I'd dump it over the fence to her so she'd have fresh grass to eat. But anyway, and then Christy, our prima donna, she was pretty set in her ways. There was certain things that she had to have, or she had certain dresses that she had to have and wore all the time. It didn't matter whether they were in the wash or not. She wanted those to wear. That was her thing. I remember her asking for her birthday. She wanted a topless dress, or a strapless dress. There we go. And her mama made her a strapless dress for her birthday, and that's when we went to St. Louis for her birthday, and we went to Six Flags. And we did all that for her birthday that year. And she's high school. She was a cheerleader. She was in all the. If the club had an F on the beginning of it, she belonged to it.
Future.
Future farmers, future homemakers, future business leaders, future whatever. She belonged to that club. And then when we moved to Terre Haute in her senior year, we left her behind, and she found many excuses to skip school. She was always going somewhere for something for one of the clubs that she belonged to. In fact, one of her teachers at graduation remarked on the fact that Christy could think of more ways of getting out of class than anybody else that they ever knew. And then Kathy. Kathy was 5 years old when she had a bicycle wreck, and she spent 3 months in the hospital. And we finally got her home. She was in a coma most of that time she was in the hospital. And we finally got her, bring her home. And then all the people in the church come over to help take care of Kathy while we were there. And of course she got all the attention, which seemed to take away from the other kids. And there was a little bit of resentment there at one time, but they kind of outgrew that. And then we felt like we did a lot with Kathy and helped her quite a bit. And so we decided to adopt somebody else with issues. So we adopted David. We adopted him when he was 6 years old, and he had problems that they weren't aware of. We ended up buying glasses for him because he couldn't see anything, but they thought he was fine. His eyesight was good. When we were signing the adoption papers and everything, they said there was nothing wrong with him. We were camping one time, and then he started having seizures.
Grandma.
And we had to run him to the hospital in Russellville. But he graduated high school as well as Kathy, and all the kids graduated. That was one of the things we insisted on, that they finish high school. We had to put up with, well, back to Kathy, when she was in Girl Scouts when she was, I can't even remember how old she was now.
She was 6.
But anyway,
6 and a half. 7.
They were selling Girl Scout cookies. She got her order blank, and she asked if she could go down to one of the neighbors so she could get cookies, or sell cookies to them. And she was gone forever, and we couldn't figure out where she was at and what she was doing, so we called down to the neighbors that she went down to take her form down to for them to sign for cookies. And they said, oh, she left here about 20 minutes ago. And then we started calling the other neighbors along the neighborhood there, and they said, well, yeah, she come by here, she wanted us to buy cookies. Anyway, we finally discovered she was about 2 miles from home, and she sold more cookies than anybody else that year. We were,
But some of them we didn't have phone numbers.
well, they didn't
or
have phone numbers
addresses.
or addresses. We had no clue who they were, so we had to go back through with her in tow and say, okay, where did you stop?
We kept knocking. We had to knock on
We had to
doors.
knock on doors. Was Kathy here selling you cookies? Well, she didn't write down your address. She didn't write down your phone number. And so anyway, she was heading to one of Christy's friends at that time.
Kristen.
That lived probably about a mile and a half from the house. She was heading over to her house to get some cookies, see if they wanted to buy cookies when we finally caught up with her. But Kathy won all the awards that year for selling the most cookies than anybody else in their troop.
She was very proud of herself.
Yes, she was. She was good for her. Anyway, we adopted David. We had him with us, and he graduated high school. We got him settled into his own place after high school up in Terre Haute. I moved around a bunch for my job, so Terre Haute was the next place we went to after Fayetteville. Then after he graduated high school there, Kathy graduated high school in Terre Haute. They lived at home until we finally figured out that we were doing too much for them and they needed to learn some independence, so we got them both into care facilities where they could learn how to deal with themselves and we wouldn't be doing for them all the time. Kind of hard to do, kind of hard to kick them out of the house like that, but so while we were living in Terre Haute, we discovered Linda's mother and stepdad were taking care of Tony. He was about 5 at the time, but they were of the age that they couldn't deal with Tony. Of course, Tony was very demanding at that time because he could get away with it. So we decided to take Tony on for ourselves and take care of him. His dad was in the Coast Guard, and his mom, I don't know at the time where his mom was at, but his dad couldn't take care of him because he was out to sea 6 months out of the year. And so anyway, JC and Lynn's mother took care of him for a while, and then we took him on. And then when we moved back to Arkansas, he decided he wanted to be an Alverson, so we adopted him too. And Tony's in the Air Force now. He's got 14 years in the Air Force. Anyway, Becky and Floyd come over and to visit and told us that Becky was pregnant with Courtney. And Linda called me up in the room I was in and said, Floyd and Becky are down here. They just told me that they're going to have a baby. They want to know what you want to call it, her to call you when she's, and I said, Uncle. And she said, Uncle? And I said, yeah, I'm not old enough to be a grandpa, so just, Uncle is what she needs to call me. Courtney was very imaginative. She liked to play with Barbie dolls, and she would set up all kinds of scenarios for her dolls so that they would do plays, and she would sit there and play with them forever. And if she tried to get you involved, she would give you a doll and say, okay, you be this and I'll be this, and I'll tell you what to say and you tell me what, you know, I'll tell you to say this and I'll say this. And anyway, but she had a good imagination. And then the next one we had was Christopher. Christopher was one of those free spirits. He, for the longest time, you could ask him just about anything and he would just flat out tell you the truth, whatever it was. He was one of those that you could not tell secrets to because he would tell the secrets to anybody. Christmas presents was one of the things you never let him see because he would tell you what you were going to get for Christmas. But he's, well, a free spirit. I don't know how else.
Very inquisitive.
He was into everything. He was always curious about. Unfortunately, he had a bad habit of getting into things and maybe getting trapped. I remember living up on the hill over on the other side of Conway here. He was out playing. Him and Tony were out playing in the yard, and he was trying to move a big old rock and ended up with the rock on top of him. So Tony had to get Mom to help him get the rock off of Christopher, so that, and Christopher limped for a little bit. But anyway, then our next one, well, the next two we married into. When Christy married Mark, we inherited Taylor and Jordan. Taylor was the little princess.
Love pink.
Pink. She
Liked to dress up.
Liked her shoes, and she was just the princess. Jordan was the tomboy. She swore up and down she was not a girl, that she was a boy. She dressed like a boy, she acted like a boy. She even played football one season. I don't think she played two. I think she just played the one. But she was definitely going to be a boy. And if you try to put a dress on her, she just had a fit. And they almost had to drug her when Christy and Mark got married to put a dress on her
For the wedding?
for the wedding.
It's mad.
She really resented that. And that's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kobe. Kobe is our ball player. He loves sports. There's some, he tried his hand at football, but he didn't like football, but he was very capable. He likes to play golf. He liked his football,
He
or
liked
his baseball. He's sports minded. He's also good with his math skills, which has paid off into a job for him, that he's getting ready to graduate college here soon. And then we have Riley. Riley is a Christy knockoff.
She's our miracle baby.
Well, she is.
We're very
She's
thankful we have
Courtney's little sister, and there's 15 years apart from them. And but she is very opinionated. She's just like her Aunt Christy. She demands at times, objects at things. She has to be dressed a certain way. But anyway,
But we love them all.
well, yeah, they're great. They're good kids. They're all good kids. And then we have a great grandson from Christopher, Connor. We took care of him while his mama was going to nursing school to get her RN degree.
And we really, really enjoyed that.
And we enjoyed seeing him grow from his infant stages up to a toddler stage. He learned. We tried to make sure we read to him and instilled in him the things that we thought he should be learning on, is a reading, and we read to him.
I think he really likes.
He likes his books. He liked coming here because he was happy to see us all the time, and he hated going away.
That's why we good grandparents.
Yeah, yes, we are.
Spoil them.
You know what? Spoil them, send them away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sugar them up. Get a lot of
Yeah.
chocolate.
But anyway, that's our grandkids and a great grandkid.